MP for Dudley South, Parliamentary Private Secretary to the Home Secretary, Mike Wood, and the Labour MP for Cardiff North, Anna McMorrin. Welcome to you both. Do you think the Boris Johnson government is actually trying to get a deal?
Yeah, they're absolutely putting everything into it. The conversations that obviously the Prime Minister had with the European Commission, with European leaders last week, Steve Barclay's obviously had similar conversations. And Prime Minister's representative, David Frost, has obviously been out in Brussels, really trying to push these talks forward and try and get that outline that President Macron referred to so that we can have this agreement next week.
Do you think they're making an effort?
Not at all. We've seen the leaks from Downing Street yesterday, and it's very, very clear that this so-called proposals, which we haven't seen the legal text for, by the way, is not going to be worth the paper it's written on. This is going to cause havoc across our borders, across the country. It doesn't seem to be a workable solution, and that is not how Boris Johnson and any of his negotiators have approached this. And also issuing threats to member states, as we've seen coming from Downing Street last night in bizarre texts being briefed out yesterday. That doesn't seem to be the way a responsible government should be operating at this time when we need to be stopping no deal to protect our communities.
This is absolutely a workable solution. It's a political decision now whether the European Union chooses to accept it and chooses to engage. Obviously, a firm proposal has been put forward to the EU. We're not arrogant enough to imagine that every dot and comma that's in it is going to be sent back with a big tick next to it.
Text?
And that's the point, because the legal text that's obviously they're now discussing in Brussels is not what will come back to Parliament. We know that, but what has obviously been set out is really the proposal for how the system works around.
How will this work? This will create essentially a hard border.
No, it doesn't at all. I mean, it is perfectly possible with current technology.
It is largely consisting of things which have been rejected previously by the European Union. So it seems a bit odd at this late stage to come up with them again.
Well, as Jean-Claude Juncker said, he's not firmly wedded to the backstop in the Irish Protocol and the previous withdrawal agreement. We know that the House of Commons has voted against that 3 times. There's not the slightest chance of an agreement that's got that backstop in it being accepted by Parliament, and I think this is a reasonable compromise with give and take for both sides that will allow trade across the Irish border, as well as maintaining Northern Ireland's position in the United Kingdom.
That is the issue, is it doesn't allow for that trade. It doesn't allow for a proper trading agreement with the EU. It's very clear that the ideology of this is looking across the Atlantic to the US and shunning our closest neighbours, and the very actions of this government are reckless. And that puts my constituents in Cardiff North at risk. And I'm not going to be standing up for that, because I don't want my constituents who work hard, those hard-working people up and down the country, who are going to be put at risk with this deal. So the only way forward is to put this back to the people for a confirmatory vote. That's the democratic,
we know that Anna wants to scrap Brexit. I mean, that's a respectable position. It's not what people voted for in that referendum. Let's put it back to the people and ask them.
You
tabled an amendment to revoke Article 50 altogether, not about a referendum. So we know what the agenda is.
Let's ask the people then,
I want to ask you, though, supposing we get to the end of this next week and there isn't an agreement, are you then perfectly happy to go all out for leaving without an agreement at the end of the month?
I want an agreement. I think the best outcome from this is for an agreement to be reached. I think
you want an agreement on one side's terms, which never seems.
Well, no, I think this is a good compromise. As I say, there's give and take on both sides. There needs to be
but we'd have to say at the moment there's pessimism that there's going to be an agreement. So if we get to the end of this week and there's no agreement, what would you want your Prime Minister to do?
Well, I think the Prime Minister's been absolutely clear. We want the deal, but it has to be a new deal or no deal. We do have to leave the European Union. We have to
crash out with no deal, which will, as we've seen the Institute for Fiscal Studies say today, that will put us back in public debt, the like we've not seen since the 1960s. Why do you want to do that to the country? Why do you want to do that to your constituents, to my constituents of Cardiff North, to those people up and down
Anna, I voted for the withdrawal agreement 3 times. I thought it was a flawed deal. I didn't like the deal, but because I thought it was better for us to have a deal and actually get out.
For the Prime Minister to break the law, which is essentially what this is.
The Prime Minister's been clear that the government will respect the law. However, I say I voted for an agreement 3 times. You voted against an agreement 3 times. Anybody who's saying that the worst thing in the world is to leave without a deal really should have voted for a deal when one was on the table.
So let's get an extension. Let's hold a confirmatory referendum and find out what the country actually wants.
Okay,
we could have had a general election next Tuesday to find out what the country wanted, but you voted against it twice.
Let's find out in a referendum.
Okay, we're not going to agree, I don't think. Thank you both very much indeed. This is All Out Politics. Coming up next, claims that the dairy industry in Northern Ireland will be wiped out by a no-deal Brexit. I'll be discussing that with the Chief Executive of the Northern Irish Dairy Council.